And welcome back to the Digital Education Station, everyone. I am Ryan Ferran, the Chief Communications Officer for the Arcadia Unified School District. Pleased to be joined by our Superintendent, Dr. Van Alstal. Dr. Van Alstal, welcome back. Great to see you as always.
Always good to be here.
So today we're talking about Collaboration Days. Yeah. This is actually our 4th year of Collaboration Days.
Seems like just yesterday.
Seems like yesterday. Time flies when you're having fun. So Collaboration Days, basically students throughout the entire district are released at 11:40. It's a minimum day for students. We have 7 of these each year, and we've been doing this, as we mentioned, for 4 years now. But while the kids leave at 11:40, the teachers are still there, and they're not playing while the kids are away. They are working very hard, and they're really to help the students, to help each other, professional development. So exactly what does that mean, and what happens when the students leave and the teachers are still there for these Collaboration Days?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what's driving all of those working days for the teachers is the fact that education is too hard to do alone anymore. So for many years, for almost 50 years, you have without the technology, without the brain research, education pretty much looked the same. So teachers just did the same thing next year that they did this year. Those times have changed, and things are happening fast. They're changing quickly. In order for our teachers to adopt and to adapt quickly to meet the needs of our students, they need time to professionally grow and collaborate with each other. So schools traditionally were very guilty of something we call sit and get, meaning that we would bring in a consultant and you would have a full day training for every teacher in the district, and then the consultant would leave and everyone goes back to the classroom. We know that that had very little impact on classroom instruction and students. So, we looked at the research. We dove in and we found out that the research was pretty solid on what makes for effective, productive professional development for teachers. The first thing is that there's choice involved. So teachers have a choice in where they're going to grow. Secondly, that teachers were able to help facilitate their own processes. And then thirdly, that it was over time. So it wasn't a sit and get one day out of the year, that it was something that was focused work throughout the school year. So we created what we call SWAGs, Small Working Arcadia Groups of teachers, to be research-based and to effectively become better at what we do in the classroom to meet the needs of kids. And so we started tackling the big problems across the district with these groups of teachers that chose to be in the room and to volunteer to tackle these problems. Like the first year, it was all about the Common Core. The new curriculum came in. It was like, how are we going to, completely added a whole new layer of math, for example. And, how are we going to tackle that? The best people to answer that problem were these vertical groups. So you might have a kindergarten teacher and a middle school and a high school teacher all trying to solve this vertical alignment of our math program. So they're working very hard, and they're working on significant challenges that we have as a district.
And one of the feedbacks we've received, while we know teacher collaboration and professional development is very important, some parents, to be transparent and quite frank, they're not thrilled with the timing of it. It's not very conducive to their schedules.
I'm one of those parents.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not conducive for them, and they're like, another minimum day, we have to adjust pickup times, we're at work. So it's a headache for a lot of parents, and we recognize that. You've heard it, anyone in the district, the principals, teachers, they hear it. So it's annoying for some parents to be honest, to put it out there. But it's also very important for us as an educational institution to do this. So we recognize, while it is painful and it is a inconvenience for a lot of people, we know that, but it's still that important to do.
Yeah. And I appreciate you acknowledging that for all of our parents, including myself, because it is a disruption, and you do have to figure out how, first of all, you have to continue to manage what days are the minimum days, because we now have school sites that have some minimum days for their site, and then we have the district minimum days. It's a lot to manage. It's important to share that for folks that are familiar with education systems throughout the world, other than the United States, it's very common that most school systems have teachers teaching about 2 to 3 hours a day. The rest of the day is for lesson development, for collaboration, for grading, for speaking with parents. the model we have in the United States, and it is what it is. I can't just go and change that single-handedly now. We pretty much have teachers working from bell to bell with kids, and that's great. But if you don't have time to reflect on your practice, to spend that time kind of standardizing what does an assessment look like with your colleagues, you're never going to get better. And we are competing with the world. We're trying to prepare our students to go anywhere in the world and be successful. So in order to keep our reputation for excellence, we have to take that time, and unfortunately the only time we have is during the school day. So we recognize it's a disruption, but we wouldn't do it if we didn't believe it was critical to providing the very best education for our kids.
Can you talk a little bit about the setup of the day and these SWAG groups, small working Arcadia groups? What I find really interesting is that it's not the high school gets together with the high school,
Right.
middle school with the middle school, or one school site. There is different grade levels, elementary, middle, high school. Can you talk about how that connection district-wide really helps students as they matriculate and teachers at different levels?
Yeah, you hear a lot about elementary school districts or high school districts where they just have high schools or they just have elementaries, and there's a lot of simplicity to having one level to think about and concentrate on and focus on. But one of the payoffs of being a unified school district is we have our kids from the time they start school until the time they graduate. So in order to really get the benefit and the payoff of that is our students should experience a seamless transition from year to year. So going from third grade to fourth grade at one school, within that school should be the same transition for that child from one of our elementaries to our middle school. In other words, they're all our employees, they're all unified in Arcadia, and they should be communicating. And so that's our goal. So when we put these groups together, the goal is that the language teachers use, the types of programs they use, should all be the same so that a student is transitioning to a new school. It sounds familiar, it looks familiar, and they just pick up just like they were yesterday at their old school.
And it's such a great philosophy, and we've been doing this more and more over the past few years. Like you said, when an elementary student goes to middle school, that's a big, scary jump.
Yeah.
Middle school to high school, big and scary. But when the 8th grade teacher's talking to the freshman teacher at the high school about this is what your students should expect, maybe prepare them for this so that transition's way easier, it's just such a seamless transition.
Now, I'll give you an example. Sometimes it's as simple as just language being used in the classroom. So I remember sitting at a meeting of science teachers, and they were talking 9th grade science from the high school with 8th grade science teachers from the middle school. And the high school teachers were saying, hey, we asked all our kids about, you remember when you learned this? And the kids were saying, we never learned that. So they're going, hey, what did you guys miss that in your curriculum? It turned out through conversation that the middle school teachers were just calling it something different. The students had learned it. So sometimes it's just as simple as talking about what language we're using when we're describing something.
So there's so many great things that have come out of these collaboration days over the past few years. We don't have time to talk about all the different groups and what they've done, but what are a few of the tangible outcomes that we've seen from having these collaboration days?
Yeah. Well, one that just comes to mind is the Leader in Me program. It's a great example that we had many different character education programs going on at our different schools, and all of them had some positives, some negatives. But once we had some conversation about, if you're a student in Arcadia and you have to transfer from one elementary to the other, or you go from elementary to middle school, wouldn't it be more powerful and we'd get a lot more out of it if we were all using the same language and the same program? So rather than it being a top-down decision, which would be a traditional thing that a school district do, like here's the program we're using, we got all the teachers together from all the schools using different programs, and they shared, what are the positives of all the different programs they're using. They went out and researched them all. They went to other school districts and they visited schools. They came back and they said, by far, we believe the best one for us is Leader in Me. It's based on Covey's work with the 7 Habits of Effective People. Same 7 habits, just for kids. And it's also something that a lot of adults, I know I was trained as an adult, so a lot of Fortune 500 companies use Covey's habits. So that was an example of our teachers spending their time together vertically, going out and finding the perfect program for us. We now are using it, and kids are hearing the same 7 habits and how to effectively use those habits when they're in TK. I know my kids are talking to me about being proactive and win-win at home, and our seniors in high school are using the same language.
Very cool. I remember a couple of years ago I went to one of the swag groups, the performing arts swag group, and talked to them. They were talking about how do we market our shows and things like that better. So they always bring in people and help kind of solve everyone's issues within
and
that
I mentioned
realm.
the math earlier, but that was a really big one for this community because there's no right answer. All of a sudden the state of California threw in another layer of math, and it's like, okay, how are our kids going to juggle this? And we know we have kids that want to get to some really high AP math levels by junior year in order to be prepared to apply for Ivy League schools. What came out of the meetings that the teachers were having is we need more on-ramps for students to get to those higher level math classes. So just because a kid isn't ready for a high level math in 8th grade doesn't mean that by sophomore year that they're not saying, I really want to take an advanced math class. So collectively, they designed a whole new math progress for us in our program, and they came and they actually presented it to the school board for the school board to approve, rather than it coming from the administration. So it was very powerful. It met all the needs. They spoke to parents, and it was very successful.
A lot of important initiatives coming out of the collaboration days. Our next collaboration day is this Thursday, or the final one of the year. So we know to have 7 of these each year, you can't just throw it on top of a busy school year schedule that is jam-packed. So how do we figure out the calendar each year and adding these days? How does all that work?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in the opening, that it's important that the days are spaced out over the year, because this is important, significant work that the teachers are working on, and it doesn't resolve in just a week. A lot of times they'll have these meetings, but then they go off by themselves and they have homework they do over the next couple weeks before the next one. So it's important that they're spaced out. But our calendar is created 2 years out in advance. And we do that because we have a community that travels a lot. You have people making vacation plans with family for over the holiday breaks, the summer, etc. You have graduation. That's always an important date for people flying in. So 2 years out, we start by getting input from the community, and then we sit down with the teachers union and we discuss dates that work. And we start to map it out. We want to be even with curriculum days in the spring and in the fall, and taking into account we have testing in the spring. There's just a lot of variables that go into it. But ultimately, we agree on these dates well in advance, so parents can find that on the website if they need to, and plan accordingly.
So again, our last one is this Thursday for the year. What about next year and going forward? What do we expect with collaboration days?
So we have approved it for the going forward for the next 2 years, and we also budget 3 years out. So we're always thinking in either 2 years and our current year, or 3 years out. And so it's looking positive. This is a structure that's working for us. It's successful right now, but we're always open to improvement and reevaluating programs as we move forward.
Dr. Bonalso, thank you so much. We understand that people have questions about this, why the minimum day, and why do we have another one? So we wanted to get the information out to people, why it's so important for our students and our teachers to have these collaboration days. So once again, as always, we appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, everyone.